You don't need a reason to exist. You don't need permission to breathe. But somewhere along the way, the world convinced you otherwise. It trained you to explain, to justify, to apologize for every piece of your being that didn't fit neatly into someone else's comfort zone. And so you did. And you turned your life into a courtroom where every thought had to stand trial, every feeling required evidence, and every decision was followed by an explanation no one truly listened to. You explained why you were tired, why you stayed in, why you needed rest. You translated your silence into a language they could accept, even when your heart begged for peace. And without realizing it, you slowly started asking the world for permission to be yourself. You carried an invisible weight made of apologies for simply existing. I'm sorry I need space. I'm sorry I didn't smile. I'm sorry I couldn't be everything you wanted me to be. And as the words poured out, something in you got quieter. Your soul, once loud and wild, began to dim. You started living in defense mode, constantly preparing to justify every choice, as if your truth needed someone else's stamp of approval to be real. But it never did. It never does. This habit, it isn't just a quirk. It's a wound, a survival response etched into your being. Maybe it began when you were young, when a frown from a parent or a silence from a friend made you feel like love was conditional, that if you didn't explain, you'd be rejected, that if you didn't behave, you'd be left behind, and so you became a master at anticipating disappointment before it arrived. You became an expert at pleasing, at shrinking, at silencing parts of yourself to be palatable to others. You stopped feeling safe in your own truth. You tiptoed through your life, avoiding missteps that might make someone uncomfortable. And each time you did, you moved further away from the raw, unfiltered version of who you are. But something in you knows. It knows this isn't the way forward. It knows this isn't freedom. Because the truth is, you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're not here to make sense to people who refuse to see you. And no amount of explaining will make someone care if they've already decided not to. The more you try to defend your soul to those who don't even take the time to look at it, the more you bleed energy into a void that gives nothing back. But what if silence was never a weakness? What if silence, when chosen with intention, is the highest form of self-respect? A quiet refusal to keep proving your worth to those who treat your feelings like inconveniences. Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means you no longer see the need to shrink into words for the sake of someone else's comfort. Sometimes healing begins not with a roar, but with a pause, a breath, a stillness so deep it echoes. And in that stillness, something ancient in you begins to stir. A voice you buried long ago begins to rise. Not loud, not demanding, just steady, certain, whole. The voice of your knowing. The voice that says, you don't owe anyone your peace. There's a power in that stillness, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that rebuilds what was broken. Because when you stop talking to be accepted and start listening to be aligned, you finally come home to yourself. You begin to remember that you are not made to explain your instincts, your softness, your need for space. You're not made to bend until you break. The people who truly see you won't need a translation. And the ones who don't, no explanation will ever be enough. So why keep exhausting yourself for an audience that was never meant to understand you in the first place? Let them misunderstand. Let them question. Let them walk away. That's not your burden to carry anymore. You don't need to set yourself on a fire to keep others warm. You don't need to bleed your voice dry just to be heard. The moment you stop explaining is the moment you start healing. It's the moment you draw a quiet, invisible line around your soul and say, this is mine. And it doesn't need to be defended. You begin to realize that some people were never listening, only waiting to respond. And no matter how much of yourself you gave, they never truly saw you. But you can. You can see yourself now, without the filter, without the fear, just as you are. So sit with yourself, not to analyze, not to fix, just to witness, just to say, I believe you, I trust you, I choose you. Because that's where your power has been waiting all along, not in the explanation, in the knowing, in the still unwavering truth of your own being. It's real. This feeling of choosing yourself. It's like stepping into a new life, a quiet rebellion against the part of you that always waited for someone else's permission to exist. When you make that choice, you're saying goodbye to the version of you who endlessly tried to explain every scar, every pause, every wrong turn. It's terrifying because choosing yourself often means standing alone, even if just for a while. But that solitude isn't punishment. It's a sacred space, a chance to heal, to rebuild who you are without anyone else's judgment or approval. There's a power in deciding, without explanation, that today you honor yourself, even if no one else notices. It becomes one of the most profound acts of love you can give yourself. For many, silence was never a choice, but a cage built by fear. A suffocating silence that wraps tight around your throat, convinces you to swallow your truth to avoid conflict, to keep others comfortable at your expense. That kind of silence is sharp, invisible glass cutting deep inside. Over time, you get so skilled at hiding the storm you're weathering that you forget what it feels like to be heard. You say, "I'm fine," while your world trembles beneath the surface. But this silence born from fear is not peace. It's a battlefield within, a quiet war that drains your spirit, dims your light, and convinces you that your voice doesn't belong in the world. There's a difference between silence that heals and silence that destroys, and it comes down to intention. Silence that heals comes when you choose yourself, when you say, "Today I care for me." Destructive silence comes from fearing loss, from believing you are not worthy of being seen or heard. You deserve relationships where silence is a balm, a moment of peace, not a prison. If you haven't found that space yet, become it. Listen to your soul, let your heart speak and rest in silence when that is the truest act of self-love. One day, without fanfare or drama, something inside you will break. Not in anger or sadness, but in a sacred stillness. You will simply say, "Enough." And in that moment, everything changes. You will realize you owe no explanations, no apologies, not because you are better, but because anyone who truly loves you sees your truth without needing you to justify it. That day is a quiet revolution, a holy choice to stop translating your soul for others, to stop begging for permission to exist fully. You reclaim your freedom by choosing yourself over the need to explain. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't bleed, but they speak anyway. They push you to explain every feeling, every absence, hoping words might stop the pain from coming back. But it's not your voice that needs to be heard. It's your wound. Remember the moments you said this hurts and they told you it was an overreaction, or when you asked for love and were called needy. From those moments, your soul learned it must explain itself to be seen. You spoke endlessly, not for attention, but out of fear of being left alone. Each word a silent plea. "Can you see me? Do you understand me? Please don't leave." But the truth is, those who refuse to see you never will, no matter how loud you scream. And those who do see you don't need explanations. Soul recognizes soul without words. There's a deep exhaustion that sleep can't fix. A weariness that comes from years spent trying to defend yourself, trying to be understood by those who never truly listened. Maybe you have felt the sting of speaking from your heart, only to meet silence, judgment, or apathy. That pain is real, but what breaks you further is the echo of feeling invisible again and again. Slowly, your voice dims. You stop sharing with the light you once had, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned some places are not meant for your truth. The soul grows tired when it's ignored, when its cries become background noise, when its feelings are just dismissed or mocked. That's when silence becomes protection, not healing. But hiding your pain doesn't make it disappear. Eventually, that hidden grief finds its way to the surface. So pause now, not to explain, but to hold yourself gently. Ask yourself where you've exhausted your spirit trying to make others understand, and what you need to truly listen to your own heart. When you listen with love, when you stop demanding explanations from yourself, healing begins. We live in a world that demands smiles, that shies away from raw pain, a world where saying "I'm fine" becomes a reflex, even when you're falling apart inside. You learn to justify your sadness, to offer reasons why you're not okay, hoping people will stay when they see your tears, as if pain needs permission to exist. But pain doesn't need approval. It needs presence. It needs space to breathe, arms that hold it, not arguments that try to explain it away. The hardest part is that pain often grows not because of what you feel, but because of how often you must justify it. "I'm just tired," you say. "It's been a rough week." And maybe that's true, but beneath those words is a soul crying out for recognition without conditions, for a love that doesn't ask why before it holds you close. It's easy to tell yourself it's just stress, a simple explanation to avoid the discomfort of feeling vulnerable. We hide what's really inside to stay accepted, to not seem weak or overly dramatic, but feeling deeply doesn't make you fragile. What breaks you is denying those feelings, pretending they aren't real. So today, give yourself permission to feel, without guilt, without needing to explain, without dressing your pain in logic or excuses. Your soul already knows the truth of your hurt. It doesn't need anyone else's approval. When you stop fighting what's inside, that's where true freedom begins. Many carry a quiet hope that opening their heart completely will bring more love and more acceptance. You share your rawest wounds, your deepest scars, believing someone will hold you closer for your honesty. But sometimes, it doesn't work out that way. Not everyone is ready to hold your truth. Not everyone has the heart to receive the parts of you that have been silent for so long. And painfully, not everyone deserves those parts. Your truth is sacred, not something to convince or justify, not a performance for approval. It's a flame that can either light a way or burn a path, depending on where and to whom you give it. Many times, out of longing for connection or love, you've given yourself fully to those who couldn't or wouldn't understand. People who twisted your vulnerability into judgment, who turned your sincerity into weakness. So you shut down, vowing never to open up again. But the mistake wasn't trusting, or even speaking. The real pain came from not recognizing who deserved to see your truth and who didn't. Learning to choose who hears your soul is one of the greatest acts of self-love. It means saying, my story is not for just anyone. It's for those who honor it. There are those who seek to know you only to control you, and those who listen to protect you. The difference is in their presence, their energy, their intention. Not everyone deserves your silence, and not everyone deserves your voice. Both are gifts, and you don't owe them to just anyone. Don't blame yourself for having opened up before, but now open only where your soul feels safe. Sometimes talking too much becomes a way of forgetting. It's a distraction and an old trick to avoid feeling the depth inside. While you explain, analyze, and justify, you drift away from yourself. You lose your center in the expectations of others. But when you choose silence, not the silence forced on you, but the sacred kind, something inside aligns. The chaos settles. This silence is not hiding, it's coming home. It's hearing the quiet voice inside that the noise of the world drowned out, your soul speaking without fear or defense. In this silence, you realize you have nothing to prove. You are not here to please or fit in. You are here to remember who you are, without explanation. Judgments fade, the need to be understood dissolves, and what rises instead is certainty. Your worth doesn't depend on how well you explain your pain, but on how deeply you live it. Silence becomes medicine and a mirror reflecting your true self. Stripped of scripts, defenses, and masks, what you were searching for outside was waiting all along inside you, quietly, patiently, lovingly. Sometimes the path back to yourself begins with one powerful, quiet moment. No shouting, no drama. Just a firm, calm decision. I won't beg anymore. This isn't pride or coldness, but dignity waking up. Self-love rising from where it knelt for so long. Because you did beg. With explanations, apologies you never owed, sweet words to cover pain, anxious silences hoping to be noticed. Sometimes begging hidden patience, in endless understanding, and pretending all was fine, but your soul remembers. It remembers how you dimmed your light to avoid trouble, how you lost yourself trying to be loved, how you explained yourself again and again, hoping to be enough. Then one day you choose yourself, not out of anger, but from love. A love so deep it no longer allows you to give away your pieces to those who won't honor them. The soul that chooses itself stops begging, stops explaining, stops waiting. It walks away and died that not resentful, but remembering. Not vengeful, but guarded. It carries its heart carefully, not to offer again, but to hold it firmly. And inside that step, everything shifts. Not outside, but deep within. Silence becomes a companion. Solitude becomes home. You become your own safe place. Trying to convince others you're enough is exhausting. A dance that drains your spirit. A conversation that echoes in your chest. What if I explain better? What if this time they understand? What if I change so they don't leave? Each time you do, you lose a part of yourself. You betray your essence to fit in, soften your truths to avoid disturbing, reshape your love to be accepted. The deepest hurt is not rejection itself, but the parts of yourself you had to give up to avoid it. Until one day, you've had enough. Not of others, but of losing yourself. Of looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person staring back. Of realizing that trying to convince someone is a golden cage, dazzling outside but suffocating within. That day your soul makes a promise, never again. No more begging to be seen by those who choose not to see you. No more translating yourself into a language others understand. No more performing to be loved. Words shrink to only what matters, what rises from your core. If they don't understand, it's okay. Your truth isn't for debate, it's for living. Those with soul will feel it, so lower your voice, not out of fear, but like a guardian of treasure. Your truth doesn't need to be loud, just true. There's no act more intimate or powerful than choosing silence. You don't stay quiet because you surrender. You stay quiet out of respect for yourself. Not because you fear their response, but because you love yourself enough to stop chasing it. Some battles aren't won by words, but by letting go. Silence can say, I owe you nothing. I don't need your approval to exist. What I know about myself is enough. And that truly is a revolution within. For years you were taught your worth depended on being understood, on making sense to others. But no one told you your worth also lives in your silence. Your voice remains alive even when you don't speak. You are whole even when you don't explain. And in that silence, something new begins. A reunion, a rebirth, a reconciliation with yourself. You stop persuading, stop pleasing, and instead crave peace. Peace doesn't shout or argue. It settles when you no longer bargain with your truth. Silence becomes an act of love, power, and maturity. The choice not to betray yourself anymore, to break the cycle, to stand firm in self-respect. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's self-choosing. Healing begins in that sacred moment. How many times have you broken just to be understood? How many times drowned in explanations no one asked for, just to avoid feeling unwanted? How many times muted your own light, thinking it would make someone love you more? Now as you've come this far, you see the strength in silence, the beauty of not having to explain who you are. Maybe healing doesn't come from saying everything. Maybe it comes from the no longer needing to say anything at all. And the soul doesn't crave words. It craves presence. It wants you to stay, to hold yourself fully, to choose you, even if no one else does.